organized by the AIESS Consortium for Regenerativeness, hosted by Xavier Institute of Management, XIM University, Bhubaneswar. Over the past 5 enriching days, we have not merely attended a conference, we have participated in a living ecosystem of ideas, a gathering where knowledge, practice, and purpose have intertwined much like interconnected roots of a thriving forest. As we enter this valedictory moment, we pause to acknowledge this regenerativeness is not an ending, but a continuous cycle of learning, reflection, renewal, and re-evolution. Our esteemed delegates will now share their reflections, guiding us to weave together the threads of knowledge, practice, and policy, pointing us toward the pathways through which regenerative thinking can take root and flourish in our institutions, communities, and collective actions. So, without further ado, may I now invite Dr. Jayant Kumar Rautrai, Professor, Asian Institute of Technology, Philippines, to address us.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants, and my friends on the dais. And in fact, this is a great pleasure of attending this particular conference. And to me, it is quite fruitful, and it has generated very useful thinking that we can carry forward in our activities, research, practice, etc., etc. I think we have spent our time very fruitfully, and almost all of us are very happy in terms of gaining some new knowledge and experience through this conference. And I must thank and congratulate this university for organizing this particular conference. Of course, from outside, one can think, hey, how come they are discussing on the issues should have been discussed in other universities where line disciplines are there, but they have taken the lead and could able to bring experts from different parts of the globe, though our number is small, but very productive. That is what I feel all about it. And it comes to the reflection. Yesterday night I sat, then I thought, what should I reflect? And they have given like some observation, way forward on research, then practice and policy. So taking into account all these points and listening to my colleagues in panel discussion, also some papers I missed only yesterday, and I am involved since 3rd till today. So therefore, based on my observations and feelings, I have jotted down few points. Maybe you will find useful. The first thing is regenerating ecosystem is an extremely difficult and multifaceted task, as we come across a variety of ecosystems which have overlapping activities and interaction process. We as a professional and diverse disciplinary group should have common understanding while working on a transboundary or transdisciplinary platform to address issues and work on practical solutions to derive benefits from different ecosystems and simultaneously help them for regeneration. So this is my first thing. Second point is people needs, particularly from livelihood point of view, are growing with rising population, for which the ecosystems are commonly overexploited, questioning their sustainability. Along with people, the diverse stakeholders or interest groups pull the system in their own ways for deriving their satisfaction. Third, observation is that stakeholders, maybe foresters, natural resource managers, policymakers, practitioners, government organizations, non-government organizations, and private players, even researchers, and many others, should be brought to a common platform on regular basis to develop agenda of actions for respective sectoral agencies while prioritizing people's participation in all ecosystems and all activities. And the fourth point is about some international agencies. The international players like IUCN, WWF, UNEP, UNDP, and other agencies having similar interest may be taken into account for collaboration and funding support to carry out this kind of activity regularly. And by the same time, say, giving them some input through our activities. The research agenda should be worked out by disciplinary groups involved in specific ecosystem before discussing on the trans-boundary platform for agreements and acceptance for implementation. The research findings on various ecosystems should be documented for common understanding and use in programs and project formulations. Then this is about best practices. The best practices around the globe should be documented and transferred to respective ecosystem for application if considered appropriate. We can go cutting across different countries and also cutting across different say ecosystems. Mapping and profiling the ecosystem in respective countries and states is very much required to provide the status to undertake studies, research, and project activities. And I would like to give few examples for our state, Odisha. The Eastern Ghats, some of the points also discussed here, and the Eastern Ghats, a huge area, and within itself there are several ecosystems, Chilka Lagoon, and some discussion was there, Similpal, Satkosia Gorge, Bhitarkonika, and overall coastal zones of Odisha are very important. However, a number of ecosystems are confined only disciplinary circles but not brought to the limelight of common people. Then this is about say protection, conservation, and my feeling I mentioned also in one of the occasion, like protection and conservation approaches and natural resource management practices are not enough unless regeneration and resilience approach are built into the ecosystem. All those things will continue, but however, we lack these 2 points. The basic concept of changing our earth to blue and green and making it more beautiful and livable in all respect is extremely important, following UN Sustainable Development Goals and emphasizing on climate action. And the last point that I would like to highlight, ecosystem education as a part of environmental studies should be reflected from the primary to university level for creating consciousness for the survival of the living world. So with this, I conclude my reflections. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Rautrai, for your insightful reflections. We now welcome Dr. Shishir Jha, Professor at the Ashank Desai Center for Policy Studies, IIT Bombay, to share his thoughts.
Good afternoon. So it does happen that, all good things also come to an end, only for a fresh start. So I would also like to really appreciate, the great amount of efforts in putting together this conference. Certainly Professor Amar, but his team has been most supportive, and I can't stop sort of, thinking how much support and help they've given. So really appreciate all of that. I have 3 comments that I want to make, but before that I'll just preface with a bit of my own background. So I have an undergraduate degree in chemistry, and then, like most students of Bihar at that time, parents, and probably not only Bihar, but perhaps from UP or maybe Orissa too, parents wanted you to take the UPSC exam. It may have changed a bit. I didn't want to do UPSC for some reason. So perhaps the other dream was, get into management. Right? So from chemistry, after 3 years and into the, at that time it was 3 years of bachelor's, 4th year of, in doing my MSc in chemistry, we had to do salt tests. I don't know if anybody has experienced doing salt test for 6 hours. If you have, you're a very brave person. Right? So at the end of 6 hours, I mostly ended up having no idea of the mix of salts that was supposed to be analyzed. But in that process, I did inhale a lot of gases of my fellow students who were doing the tests. So I realized that chemistry was also something I was not really quite fit for. As if not UPSC, then the other option, as I mentioned, was management. I did apply to schools in US, and I got admission at upstate New York, a place called Syracuse University. Don't go there in the winter time. It's very cold. That's why I was, we got 42 inches of snow over 2 days, and very, strong wind chill factor. So anyway, from chemistry I went to management. Even management was something I was not quite disillusioned with. And the year was 1989. I don't know if many of you obviously remember, but 89 was a very, what should one say, a watershed moment, globally speaking, right? The collapse of Eastern Europe. So I got increasingly interested in international relations and political science. And much to the dismay, I was telling Amar, much to the dismay of my relatives, including my parents, that, this guy has gone for management and he's moving to international relations and political science. So I did end up starting my PhD journey. The point I'm trying to say is that in some ways, when I reflect on this, it has given me a certain sense of, a background in science, some understanding of management, and perhaps, also understanding of political science. So, and when students come to me and, say, should we focus a lot on some things, I say, that's not really essential. One should have perhaps as wide an engagement with life and, many ways of learning. So when I came back to India, 1998, at time, with the PhD in political science, one normally applies to universities. So the universities I got to know would look at my CV, and this guy has a chemistry and a management, and then international relations, and then political science. They're much too confused, right? So they were very polite. They would not say anything, but many times my CV was just gently returned. Thank you for applying. So IIT Bombay and maybe other IITs took, perhaps said, we'll be a little more flexible. So I joined IIT Bombay in 2001, and then ironically, I joined the management department. And then eventually, when the policy center started in IIT Bombay, I went to policy because that was closest to political science. But all this, as I've said, has actually, I think, added to a sense of more range of inquiry about many things. So, and I'm saying that because the whole issue around complexity, which was some comment I made yesterday, and I want to pick up on that thread. So the 3 points, as I said, first is the significance of complexity as an integral aspect of regenerativeness. So how does one, there are many ways of understanding or defining regenerativeness, one of which, among others, is, how are systems self-sustainable, right? They acquire those characteristics, not that it is a permanent state of affairs. Obviously, these regenerative systems are learning, right? The old equilibrium must give into new forms of equilibrium. But the self-sustaining nature is a crucial part, right? How much are you able to not overtly depend on external criteria? So regeneration, I've written, is about moving beyond past older equilibriums and inviting or engaging with new transformations. In this way, regeneration invites, and this is something I also want to sort of underline, regeneration invites a vulnerability to the core of its philosophy. Because if one is pivoting around the question of, into the question of complexity, and you also think about a world that has many layers, where many things that you do not know has existed before. So you're in some ways inviting a new vulnerability in terms of encountering new things. So that's how I mean vulnerability. By renewing, adapting, and always evolving, regenerativeness is different from being merely generative. So in many ways, regenerativeness requires working with living systems which are complex. And then complexity, what does it mean for me? It requires understanding unpredictableness, feedback loops that sometimes amplify but sometimes also dampen, right? And forms of agency that are not stable. Forms of agency that are more distributed. So one set of thoughts I have, which I think this conference has really made me feel more acutely about, is the question of complexity in all its ways, and it has many challenges, as Dr. Harish Hande was also saying. How do we think about these problems with a fresh perspective? The second point is the thing about nudging. Given that I'm also in the public policy school at IIT, and yesterday we had a plenary session on it. So through public policy, institutions and forms of appropriate governance, can systems be nudged in the direction of generativeness and more significantly in regenerativeness? Excuse me. Most status quo systems are governed by frameworks, and we had some of the discussion yesterday, by frameworks of efficiency, of control, of prediction, of risk minimization, as opposed to frameworks of emergence, diversity, experimentation, and creativity. So public policy, institutions, governance can nudge some of these systems. And one example I tried to give yesterday in terms of trying to rethink how private aggregated data can be used, right, to convert them into public goods. So emergence is not something that can be engineered, it has to be cultivated. And that became very, very clear in our farm visit, right? It's not something that you engineer, it's something that you have to be patient with, because these complex systems are non-linear, they evolve. And you are supposed to, that's the fun part of this understanding of regenerativeness, right? That you are really able to grapple with that form of essential complexity. One point I'd like to make before I move to the third point is the very desire for control almost always destroys the very conditions needed for regeneration. Right? So they are actually at the opposite ends. And as a political science student, one of the issues that I also wanted to ask, as you know, in the last session we had, is that we don't talk enough about what makes systems degenerative, right? Certainly regeneration is a goal, but how are we caught up endlessly, right, considerably in having our systems, you know, always breaking down? You know, what is it that is really coming in the way? I mean, we have the answers for much of it, but can we more precisely put our fingers on it and, you know, move past it? The third point is the issue around intentionality. So systems thinking and regenerativeness should be inclusive at both ends. When I say both ends, in terms of who are the people thinking, which Dr. Harishande mentioned, right? Thinking about the nature of the problem, you know, diversity of people, and then at the other end, who are you solving the problem for? Right? So at both ends, how do we bring in the question of inclusiveness? So and just another point here, in terms of understanding intentionality, I also want to underline the role of emotion. Right? Emotion not as sentiment, right? I know you understand that it is not that, but often we mistake emotions as merely sentiments. No, it is not, right? Mr. Subhash Sharma made a very interesting comment the other day that, you know, when the farm becomes regenerative, among many other things, you know, he was saying that everything becomes very joyful, right? Maybe the microbes too, we don't know, right? But the birds and, you know, every other living entities around that seem to alter the very way that they relate to the soil, relate to the land, right? So I see that as one dimension of emotion. So emotions are not merely mechanical parts. Too much in our plenary yesterday. It's difficult to measure such emotionally laden intentionality, right? Often in our research, we are asked to be quote unquote objective, right? And being objective has many different layers and many different shades of meaning, right? One of which I think sometimes is misconstrued about being objective is that, well, you see almost every object in some frame that does not distinguish too much in terms of the nature of the subjectivity that you're encountering, right? So how is your, you know, you're often asked in research, you know, how is this replicable in a different context? Well, perhaps it is replicable in some ways, but cannot be. When it involves human beings and it involves complexity, you can't expect it to be replicable in those ways, right? This is not physics experiment, it's not a chemistry experiment, right? So often I think for a good regenerative system, there will be some amount of, I hope, you know, not just some, considerable amount of emotional transformation. And so it's important. I was having a fairly longer discussion with Ahmad yesterday evening, and this question came up again and again, the nature of intentionality. We often, again, sort of put it into the background, right? Most of our research actually treats intentionality with suspicion, particularly positivist research, right? But just because we are foregrounding intentionality, how do we think about it even more carefully, you know, and opening it up in a manner that is suggestive, right? You know, issues like resilience, etc., are interesting issues. So these are three things. Perhaps we'll have some, you know, chance to be able to talk to each other also. But as I said, the three things, just to summarize, one is on inclusiveness, the second point was on nudge, and the first point, in fact, was on questions around complexity. So with those comments, thank you for listening. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Jha, for that deeply enriching address. I now request Dr. Shashmi Nayak, Ambedkar Chair Professor at National Institute of Social Work and Social Sciences, to address this gathering.
Thank Good afternoon. So, I live with Amar, and there's so much of dialogue, and whenever Amar comes up with an idea, I think I'm the first one to critique it. And I still remember when Amar started working in the farm sector, then he started working with FPOs, and he was doing studies on organic farming, dyeing industry, so many. And I have seen his thinking evolve. And then finally, he started talking about system science. And I felt that he was transgressing into my territory. So I said, well, in social work, we begin with system science, person in an environment. That's what we do for casework. And, you know, this is, you have to be non-judgmental, and you have to be this, and you have to be that. And I just started telling him all these things. And Amar just takes in everything so that we don't have fights in the house. But I guess he goes and he does a lot of reading after that. And so, I mean, after a couple of months, he started calling me out. Well, this behavior of yours is not right. You know, you're not being non-judgmental, or you're not being confidential or whatever. So I was like, okay, now system science thinking is getting into his way of looking at things. So now when I see Amar interacting with others, I can see the transformation. And just as Professor Shishir comes from a chemistry background, Amar started with chemical engineering, moved on to management, then to international business history, and then to strategy, then to agriculture, and now to system science, and now to regenerative system science. And he has this model in which he's trapped all of us. And so we, so we are here together. And I must thank all of you for coming here. It has been a wonderful experience listening and learning from all of you. He even asked me to chair a session, and I said, please don't do that, because my teacher and my PhD guide was one of the speakers in the plenary session, and I said, I don't want to be the chairperson in which he's presenting, you know, please make him the chair. But anyway, he didn't come, so I had to take over. This plenary session was, I think it agreed on so many things. It agreed first that we should have justice, we should have social justice. And for that we need socio-ecological transformation. So that has to be a paradigm shift that has to happen in all disciplines. It also called for transdisciplinarity. Well, Professor Zell had so many things to say, but if I look at everything in common, it was that we should overcome all our value conflicts and come together on one plane. It called for a shift towards fraternity. We think fraternity is very simple, but actually making fraternity work even at the village level is so challenging because we are so divided. We don't agree on anything, especially in India. We are divided along caste, along faith systems, superiority and inferiority in terms of income. So very difficult to bring fraternity in a village or in a community. I've been working in communities for more than 30 years, and I still can't say with confidence that we've been able to achieve it. It also called for a common responsibility towards creating knowledge systems that would regenerate both the human self and human society. And for that, we did rely on different belief systems, on the social teaching of the Catholic Church, and to Buddhism, and I'm forgetting his name. No, not Bante. The engineer. Gary, yes. And Gary could work around. He saw that the system science, the regenerative, the AIESS framework, and the Eightfold Path could be drawn together. So that was wonderful. That was a new way of looking at Buddhism. I do turn to Buddhist value systems while teaching social work and even while practicing social work, but I hadn't looked at it from the AIESS framework. Finally, a society can be considered to be regenerative only if it takes care of its weakest, the poorest, just like we take care of the microbes in the farm or in the gut. We also need to take care of the weakest. To be truly regenerative, to be truly resilient, we need to take care of the excluded, the marginalized, and the oppressed. I think that was the learning from the plenary session on social relationships, beliefs, and cultures towards regenerativeness. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Shashmi Nayak, for your sharing, particularly insisting on justice dimensions that we need to look into. We now invite Dr. George Samuel Hansdag from Christian Medical College, Vellore, to deliver his address.
I'm not sure the loud clap is for me to go back or speak something. Thank you and good afternoon. Just hearing Dr. Shishir's sharing, so he's from Bihar, I'm from Jharkhand, which was a part of Bihar, 2000. Did my medicine 84 to 94 at AIMS Delhi, 10 years there and then 6 years in Nepal. Worked there for some time, and since 2000 have been in Christian Medical College. Just since everybody's sharing about what they have done, I'm just trying to reflect. I'm not sure we are supposed to reflect on the conference and not on your life, but actually both intentionality. So what you have gone through in your life is really decides how you choose things in life. The more disturbed it is and the more confused it is, you'll end up deciding something that you may not have started off with, and that also brings into the mind. If you're predetermined on certain things, there's a good chances that you may miss the real thing. Somebody says, always choose the best, and the good is the enemy of the best. So if you settle with good, you will lose the best. So sometimes keeping your mind open to things is much more important, and let that real thing happen in its own time. I did apply for cardiology after I finished my MD, didn't get in, and I was not very keen on it, and then after some time I was wondering what should I do. Medicine looks after the physical part, psychiatry looks after the mental part, nobody's looking after the social part. So I thought, okay, let me do MA Sociology from Annamalai University. And when I was reading the book, it talked about the hierarchy of sciences. So sociology is on the top. I said, how do you put sociology on the top? The exact sciences are on the base. Mathematics is on the base because you can understand very clearly. What you can't understanding very clearly goes higher up. So mathematics, physics, inorganic chemistry, organic chemistry, then biology, and what is difficult to understand is psychology. Imagine understanding one mind is so difficult. Understanding multiple minds interacting with each other is impossible. So really speaking, when you see these polls, predictions, poll prediction is trying to predict what people are going to vote for, and that is a very complex predictions, because how do you understand one mind and how do you understand multiple minds? And that's why sociology is on the top of the list. So I said, okay, do something which nobody understands, including I also don't understand it, but then that is what it is. And as it was being shared, that people are divided, and understanding division itself is interesting. If everybody was same and everybody agreed to you, what a boring life it would have been, right? Let's do this. Yes, let's go this. I think this is like this. Oh, I agree with you what you're thinking. I mean, you may wonder what is this happening. Whatever I'm saying, everybody is agreeing. So sometimes this diversity and differences is the real essence and the spice of life. If everything was same and everybody agreed to the same thing, then life will stop having a meaning. And that's where we are going a little into the philosophical point. In science, you try to bring everything together, but in reality, nothing is together. Every human being is different. Every fingerprint is different. Every retinal images that you see in the eye scan is different. So that's how God has created us different. And for some reasons, we somehow want to see it all same. It's a struggle between these two things, which really makes life interesting. And I think as Amar, I mean, it's very interesting to observe him. He just listens to you, whatever you say, and he imbibes everything, speaks few things. After some time, you realize that, am I speaking too much? Is he thinking whatever I'm speaking is trash, that he is not even responding to it? But the ability to imbibe is something that you learn. So in regenerative science, the things that I've been reflecting is, number one, we are aiming for something that is ideal, something that is true, but I am also thinking that we are also looking at aiming for something that is foundational and fundamental. Because if that is the truth, that is the fundamental, we have to pursue for it. It takes time, requires patience, and it takes a team, requires humility to work along with people. And somebody said that I went to change the world. Nobody changed, so I came back to my country. I thought, let me change my country. Even that didn't change, so let me change my state, district, town, home. Let me at least change my family. I tried doing that, even the family didn't change, so I got very disappointed what to do. And as I was thinking about it, I said, why don't I change myself? So I started reflecting out, very difficult to change your own self. But as I changed myself, my family changed, my neighborhood changed, my district, state, country. So sometimes that the algorithm or the point that you need to start has to be different. And I think from regenerative science point of view, these are some fundamental things that as you kind of think, reflect and understand, you start understanding different things. So really from the health point of view, and then everybody has been talking about systems, and so I also am readjusting my mind to think systems. So what systems we have? So we have a physical environment, temperature, sunlight, air, pollution, noise, water. If I look at health, each of these things actually affect my health, and there's a good amount of science on that. Somebody said that you guys have not talked about that part, but really speaking, our temperature, our sunlight, we get vitamin D, the air, pollutions, all our respiratory diseases, noise, water. We have a social environment, starts with our families, our relatives, our friends, our colleagues, our neighbors. They technically either provide you support or can be the source of stress in your own mind. Nutrition, we had so much talks on agriculture. What I really wanted to bring in is the food processing. What we grow in nature is what is healthy for us. The whole business and industry of food processing on a grounds that you can keep food for the longest are really being identified as a source of most of our health and diseases that is coming up. So something that kind of connects at that level. Physical activities, technology, finances are things that helps us to how to promote health. We can use all of them in a kind of a positive way, aligning to our lifestyle. And then the other perspective is the life course. To look at from people from home, you move into schools, you move into colleges, workplace and communities. If you have to really impact health, somewhere in their life course, you have to think of how to impact them. We are thinking of a school health program. It was nice to hear about the schools program. When they are young, when their minds are in the formative stage, is a time when you have to teach them all the things related to life sciences, about health as we talk about it, so that those habits, when it is formed early in life, most likely will stay on for the rest of their life and they would remain healthy. So I'm also looking at health from three perspectives: from the service, education and research perspective. So in terms of services, we may need to think about how can we come up with guidelines as to what kind of health services we can provide. We are looking at networking and technology use for providing and educating them. Education is something I'm just thinking about hearing various presentations also. Can we come up with a curriculum? Depends on which group that we are looking at. If you're looking at schools, can we come up with a curriculum for a regenerative science to be incorporated within the schools, within the colleges? For us as medical sciences, how can we have these things being incorporated? So that means we really need to think through, put all the best evidence-based informations together, coming up with a curriculum. Research, multicentric studies across, now that we have so much of network, and doing some multicentric studies, looking for grants. Government does give a lot of grants for that. And finally, I just wanted to leave with, I was asked to write an article on, the article was entitled Lifestyle Medicine as a Solution to the Ticking NCD Time Bomb. Lifestyle as a solution to the ticking NCD time bomb. If you look at the non-communicable disease, the way at which it is growing and the amount of resources that needs to take care of it is just not financially feasible for any government to do it. And if we have to really change that tide around, you really have to look at how to emphasize lifestyle, because that's the ticking time bomb. And then while writing that, this thing came up. We call it as a seed to forest transformation. Seed to forest. You have a seed, you have roots. So seed is your inner being, where that's where your worldview is formed over a period of time with the knowledge and experience. And that worldview determines your choices. The roots are the choices. The soils are where you get your options. And based on your choices, your stem and the trunk comes up. So trunk is a habit or the behavior that you have found. And based on that, you have fruit. And a tree is formed. And one transformed tree can transform the other trees, and that's the forest. So seed to forest transformation is just a kind of a thought that we have brought in. We may need to test it on the ground to see how does that change, because sometimes lifestyle is something that is, you can't just preach it to others. If you don't practice it, hardly anybody would listen to you. This will be only one medicines that you have to practice it in your own life for anybody to hear you and follow you. So I think I take in a lot of thoughts. One of the areas that I may want to understand and maybe collaborate with others would be in systems. How do we as a medical professionals can think about a system? You're looking at a whole populations and their health being addressed. And health, I'm using it in a broader sense, not just the physical health, but the mental, the social, the spiritual, the environmental, all of it together. How do we reach out to such a large populations? And the biggest things, the toughest things to change is behavior. And at a community level, attempting to change people's behavior, you really need to have something to think about, ponder upon, and put our systems in place so that somewhere where we believe, where we begin, will slowly catch up and take to the rest of the fire. So I'll stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Hansdick, for your enlightening contribution. I request Dr. Bhaskar Basu, Xavier Institute of Management, Exam University, to share his address.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Before I reflect my thoughts on the conference, I would also like to state that my formative years of schooling was in a school called St. Xavier's, Ranchi, which also happens to be in Jharkhand currently. That time it was in Bihar. So I don't know, whether there is too much of coincidence here in the panel or bias. I happened to be there because my father was a chemical engineer posted in Coal India Limited. And pardon me if we have too many, coincidences, but I can be certain that there was no bias in the choice of Pranil. Before I also admit that my daughter is also pursuing chemical engineering. Okay, so, well, coming back to this topic, my first, lessons on systems thinking came from a very famous book I had read, and most of you might be aware of it, was that of Peter Senge's The Fifth Discipline. And this fifth discipline, the book published in the early 90s, reflects on one of the tenets was this system thinking, but amongst the other disciplines also, and that is about personal mastery, mental models, shared vision, and the team learning. This also holds good for the theme which we are actually talking about, which is regenerativeness. And this book also, if some of you have not read, could actually go through it because it is still relevant in today's world. Okay. So now this effort of organizing this ICRE goes back to around a year back when we were actually, and there are a few persons who are in the dais who are also involved, and also we have our colleagues here, some of them who are there on the other side. So, this kind of conference would not be possible if there was not a team effort. And I am fortunate that Professor Amar, thought it appropriate to include me in his team. But I must also admit that one of the reasons for getting into it was, that intentionality we talk about, the sociological, perspective, because I have been, besides, studied in a Jesuit school earlier, as I mentioned, and my dad also was a student of St. Xavier's, Calcutta, okay, which is also a Jesuit school. So that is inherent in us. And in the morning, Naila madam was referring to how these values are created right from the school level, at that level, okay, which comes from. And so therefore, added to that, I had worked in a public sector company called Steel Authority of India Limited. So my initial foray was into the industry before I switched to academics. So even this SAIL is a government enterprise, and they had some social responsibilities. It is not that, the government will mandate that 2% of your revenue should be, given into some kind of corporate social responsibility principles. They had a lot of social responsibilities. They built hospitals, they built townships, they provided education. So that kind of, thought process was already there. So, and this, participating in these workshops and conferences have only, strengthened my belief. There are obstacles, there are, as Dr. Harish also mentioned, there will be failures, but still, we must still try. Out of 10 times, I also failed. One of my intentions was getting more organizations into the AIESS consortium, because I believe that the kind of problems that we are grappling with, it needs a sort of approach across different domains, what we have been talking about. It's about in the systems thinking means you have to include it is a collaborative approach. So therefore, for instance, if one of the things I would actually look at, if I say that how do we eradicate cancer, or how do we look at solving a problem like cancer in the health world. So I am sure that it is not only the medical fraternity who is responsible, there will be a host of other, entities or domains who are also interlinked to this system. So similarly, I was also listening to some of the other tracks throughout the last 3 days, but even before that, I was fortunate to be part of one of the methodology workshops in which Professor Eisen Ray introduced the concept of PFMS, okay, right at the beginning, okay, the practitioner framework, methodology and situation framework. And the next day we had a visit at NISWAS, and there actually I was quite impressed, or I was quite, kind of affected by the talks around regenerative education, regenerative health, and could see for myself the what we call about action research. When I had been following the Professor Amar's foray, and I could see it fructify through the farms which I visited. And indeed, the talk by Mr. Subhash Sharma was really compelling. And he's a Padma Shri, but he had actually hadn't done any formal education, but still, you could see his learning from nature. Okay, so that was another fascinating aspect of the conference. Besides this, we had a lot of very important sessions of which I was a part, and that includes some of those was which I can relate to is the trauma registries in CMC, and we had somebody presenting about a rare disease ecosystem. There was a bureaucrat who actually talked about the implementation of Ladki Behan scheme, which is a direct beneficiary scheme. So, and of course, climatic and agri-related themes. But what I would be, leaving with in this conference, or leaving with some thoughts of mine, some questions that we need to think together. And specifically, I'll be talking about 3 areas. One, which is education, which is close to me and where I'm working in. And, Pavel had actually also specifically told about the intentionality and how you actually go about looking at, he had mentioned about schoolage. Okay. Now, the thing is that, we believe in that, but there is also, in our business schools, there is a game which is played on rankings. So it's like a, kind of NIRF rankings. We need to follow these metrics. And so it's a vicious cycle, okay, where it is difficult for you to, get back. And if you look at the metrics, I see it more as degenerative metrics rather than the regenerative one. So you have the, what you call the, the syndrome is such that, it's a paradoxical syndrome. What do we do? So if we are going into that, then there is also a loop of, that input-output feedback loop. And we get, somehow mired there. So that is an area where we have to think of. And as we know that, our Jesuit value of education is still a lot of, regenerativeness thoughts are there, design thoughts are there. But again, in terms of looking at what the market wants, what we want, okay, in this NIRF game, as I call it, so to stay afloat, somewhere what kind of balance can be taken, that is something that we have to think of. Secondly, I also talked about this earlier in the morning. In the manufacturing sector, there were a couple of presentations. There was this gentleman from Micron, I had mentioned it, and there was somebody from Steel Authority of India Limited. I am trying to get them into the fold, okay, of AISS. The first step was actually getting them in for the conference. Now, I am still flabbergasted to see that in steel industry they are still following the BOF route, which is, not very, friendly to the ecology. So some other methods which they can think of, which benefits the society at large. And that is what I had mentioned specifically in their aim to be net zero by 2050. And thirdly, of course, which I had touched upon is, the way I look at it is, in the medical fraternity, we are still grappling with something called cancer. So if I also say sometimes in this world of AI, if AI can actually cure cancer, then it's transformatory. Otherwise, it's like a hammer where you can hit it and you have to be very careful where you hit it. Okay, so therefore, I hope that this conference also has brought in, new, practitioners, new academicians into the fold, and I think I could not get that time to, summarize in the last session, but Gary had done it beautifully about that AIESS framework, and we want more organizations, more individuals to join in so that we can, collectively find responses to problems which we can address through systems thinking. And that is what I will leave with today, with the thoughts of today. And as they say in French, au revoir till we meet again. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Basu, for your insightful thoughts. We now invite Dr. Paul Senkel, Dean of Academic Affairs, Prescott College, UK, to address the gathering.
Great, thank you very much. And good afternoon. Good afternoon. I like that. So I rewrote this about 3 times just sitting there because I'm trying to enact regenerativity. So I'm continuing to regenerate these ideas. And I think that that's happened a lot over the last week, and perhaps with many of you. That you might come with a preconception, you might come with an idea, and that idea changes because you go to a session and you hear something, something from a completely different field that sparks the way that you might think, and it changes your framework. And I really appreciate the reflective tone that this session has begun to take, and I appreciate whoever started that, because it reminds me of, we would always have an opening and a closing circle for all of our programs at Schumacher College, and we would sit outside under some really tall pine trees around a fire. There's usually more smoke than fire, so you'd end up smelling like smoke at the end of the class. But we would all sit and everybody would go around and share what they thought and how they reflected. And I think that that's such an important part of any process because it is part of the experiential learning cycle. It's part of ecological cycles, regenerative cycles, to have a reflective piece within. So I'm really appreciative that we're having that piece here. And I was also reflecting on the expertise, and I know one of our colleagues earlier called into question expertise, and I think that's exactly the right thing to do, that no one person is an expert in everything, but we may have our areas of focus and our areas of interest, and are also hopefully bringing humility to that. So I bring the humility of being probably the only one at this conference with 3 degrees in English literature and 0 degrees in science, economics, finance, management, IT, systems, or anything like that. So I have a BA, an MA, and a PhD. So for me, that brings a completely different perspective to how I interpret some of what happens at the conference. And I'm hoping that my small contributions might also be useful. And in the process, I think in the process of developing those degrees or going through those degrees, I decided that literature wasn't everything that there needed to be. So this is the reflective piece. When I got to writing my PhD, I decided I want to write it about the mountains, so that I had the excuse to go to the mountains and go on the trails and explore the world, and then write about that. And so it ended up being a book about the sort of the cultural and literary history of the northeastern United States. But it was through that experience, and then I started to understand that practice is in fact the most important thing. That I can sit in a room and read books, and book after book after book, but until you go out into the world and you see that connection with place, then those books will only be what you have in front of you. So with that in mind, and I was also reflecting on the fact I was here in 2022, as a number of us were, and just reflecting on how much has changed at the farm, how much has changed in the conference. And as an example, when we toured the farm last time with Amar, I think there were 3 of us that were walking out there, and this time there were maybe 30 or 40 of us, and trampling unfortunately over some of the farmland. But just the amplification of what regenerative and interactive system science has become over those 3 years is quite transformative in and of itself. So I think that's a testament to everybody that's participated in this process. And certainly, I'm very happy to be here in person and not having Amar, text me and say, "Can we meet at 5 p.m. IST?" And then I would remind him that that's 5:30 a.m. In Arizona time. And he said, "Oh, that's okay. We can meet at 6." I said, "Okay, we can meet at 6:30 a.m. Arizona time." And I know Tina had similar experiences so I'm glad to have a more human schedule here. So just a couple of specific reflections, and these are very particular. Thinking about the threads when Shruti Chanda was talking about the sustainability of kulhads the other day as a student here at XIM, and the fact that we have at this conference undergraduate students, graduate students, PhD researchers, people from industry and career academics all presenting together. I think was absolutely brilliant to be able to. It doesn't often happen in academic conferences that you very much separate those tiers. But I really appreciated understanding that cultural perspective, understanding the sustainability and perceptions of that. To Sumita Sin's medicinal plant resource management in the session that I chaired, which ended up having a wonderful sort of dialogue across indigenous perspectives on natural resource use, natural resource management, and the stresses that indigenous or tribal communities in India face with respect to their own ecosystems. And then Dr. Peter Rosit's assertion, I think on the first day, that love has an ecology, and I quoted that in my notes because I really appreciated the distinction between sort of the horizontal and the vertical that came up in that session. And how we're often thinking about networks as being quite horizontal, but that the verticality, and whether it's called spirituality or God, or whether it's called affect or emotion, I think that embodied affective piece is absolutely integral. That term was used as well, integral to that process, and spirituality is core. So we also learned a lot about the soil microbe and gut microbe health, which I've heard about previously, but in this context, thinking about it in a systems context, was really illustrative to make the connections between all of these different things. Also, Dr. Trivedi's call to drive toward authentic, measurable outcomes, I think we all heard that, and I take that to heart because we do have lots of ideas. And I think we've heard about lots of ideas, and I joked with Dr. Eisen-Ray that there's a certain theme that you have. Well, I have this wonderful idea, or rather it starts with, I have this big challenge in the world. The world is degenerative and unsustainable. I have this great idea, and here I've tried this idea, and this idea works in a small context, but when I try to scale it, then the system is against that small context, and it's difficult to move forward. How do we solve that? So I've heard that thread time and time again. If there's something that I take away and bring into this session, is that's what we need to do next. Is we need to continue, and very often in conferences, you have this conference, you have these wonderful ideas, everybody exchanges business cards and WhatsApp numbers, and then 2 weeks later, you never talk to anybody. So I would say, since this is a systems science conference, we should think about ourselves as that system, and how we can use the strength of that system to move these ideas actually forward. So when we come back again at the next conference, we'll have solutions to some of those challenges. We will have worked forward, and maybe we set that actually as a challenge to ourselves, that we build one relationship, and we cultivate and we have one deliverable by the next time that we come together. So maybe we can articulate and formalize that sort of challenge moving forward. And I will say, underscoring my point that it's all about education. And so as an educator, as a leader in progressive ecological education in the US, it's imperative on us to work across sectors. And so again, to work transdisciplinarily across sectors and across nations. Because nations are becoming more and more isolated from one another. I feel that in the US. It's true around the world. And so I think opportunities for us to come together as an international group and then continuing that work as we move forward is absolutely essential. So again, I think we've been asked over this week to think about small solutions, and I would say that upon reflection, I want to think about the bigger solutions. So I'll repeat this anecdote probably for a third time, so apologies to some who have heard it, but when I gave a talk at the old campus with the MBA students, I talked about what could a regenerative system look like. And one suggested that, well, electric cars are a regenerative system. And another student said, wait a minute, how are electric cars a regenerative system? And so we had the conversation, and they started thinking, well, maybe you could change the car, to make the batteries better or lighter or something like that, or make them ecologically better. And then we stopped and said, wait, why do we need cars at all? So I think we're at the moment in education, in the cars at all question. So why are we thinking in a small way? Let's think in a much bigger way and change the frameworks that give us the space to do the work that we have to do. So, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Senkel, for your meaningful and forward-looking address. I now request Mr. Smith, who served as the president of the International Society for the Systems Science, to share his thoughts and observations.
Wow. Well, first of all, I feel a great deal of responsibility. So many great thinkers here in the audience. I also feel a great sense of responsibility because of the challenge that we all face, and I take that very personally. I'm also a chemist, and I blame my parents. Yeah, I blame my parents because they gave me a chemistry set when I was 12, and that was my first experience of systemness, if you like. Imagine you take two colourless liquids and you mix them together, and it goes yellow. You get precipitate, and you get weird smells, and it was just two colourless liquids. How did that happen? Yeah. So, I started engaging with chemistry and the magic of transformation. And when we look at chemistry, chemists basically play with chemicals in the transformation of chemical substances. And as systemists, we play with systems concepts when we transform systems. And then, of course, we get into the debate of whether systems really exist or not, or whether they're just in the mind and a useful construct. But of course, everything in the universe that we think about is just a mental model, because everything ultimately is just quantum information, and our physicality is just an illusion. Hey, so yeah, crazy stuff, eh? So there's just so much to think about. I mean, I've had the delight of being engaged with this right from the beginning and to the end, and I appreciated very quickly that the whole of the conference setup had been organised in terms of the 8 elements of AIESS. So as we've gone through the conference, I've been able to see the relationships and the flow across all of those, and it's led to a lot of thoughts. And I'll do my best to try and reflect on some of the things that came to mind during the conference. But what certainly did come out to me was the coherence. Everything that we've been talking about all follows fundamental universal patterns of systemness, and we've seen it from beginning to end. I think you all know I'm a systems engineer as well, and well, first of all, engineers aren't really thought to be, that spiritual in terms of their nature, but this engagement with systems has certainly raised my appreciation for spirituality and certainly how everything is connected. Now, when I talk to engineers, they see complexity as a problem, uncertainty, difficulty. And what I've been trying to explain to them, and I think many of you appreciate this, that complexity is actually something something to strive for. All systems are complex, but as you go through the various levels from quarks through molecules all the way up to our cultures, you'll see a rising level of complexity. And when I talk about complexity, I'm talking about the properties and the richness of those systems. Complexity for me is an appreciation of the whole. It's understanding a system in the context of its environment and all of the features that that system offers to its environment. Now, as engineers, one of our responsibilities when we create systems is to think about those emergent effects, think about the complexity that we're trying to create. And when we design systems, we try to make them as elegant as possible. We try to minimize their complicatedness. So complicatedness is all of the components and all of their interactions, and the more components and the more interactions there are, the more complicated the system. Nature is very, very good at creating elegant systems, and we are not very good at that. We create complicated systems that are fragile and often degenerative. That also led me to another line of thought this week. The only true source of regenerative power is actually from the sun. Because every time that we create systems, we're always borrowing energy and elegance from other systems. You just cannot help it, because the nature of the universe is actually degenerative. It's called entropy. When we create systems, when we create order, we're working against entropy. And ultimately, the power that allows us to do that comes from the Big Bang. Because all of that energy that created the protons, the neutrons, which led to the fusion in the suns, that was all born from the Big Bang. Whether there's a creator or not, or whether it's just the nature of the universe, no one really knows. This leads me on to another thought that I had during the week, and it was when we were walking around the farm. I think it's helpful to think of the farm as actually a living organism. When you draw the comparison of a farm with, our biology, there's structures there, there's the cardiovascular system, there's the immune system, there's the farmer who provides essentially the brain for the farm and cares for the farm, looks to the future, anticipates the elements, nurtures the ground, and that also reminds me that you can then take that analogy of the farm and the farmer looking after the farm and what we really should be doing with this planet. The planet, again, could be considered an organism, an overall whole, And we, as a community of humanity, have the potential to provide that intelligence stewardship for the planet as a whole. But in order to do that, we need to grow up. We need to stop behaving like children and start behaving like adults and take the responsibility for the planet as a whole. And these are some of the things that have come to my mind during this week at the conference. But in order for us to enact the change that we need to see on the planet, we all need to start to work together, and we all need to start providing that appreciation of systemness and systems thinking. And systems thinking is for everyone. It's not just for academics and scientists. Everyone needs to have some level of appreciation of systems thinking. And those are just a few of the thoughts that come to me this week. And thank you all.
Thank you, sir, for your valuable perspectives. I now invite Dr. ICRE, President of International Federation of System Science, to address the audience.
Hello again. One of the advantages or disadvantages of being almost at the end of the queue is that I can observe how low the energy levels are getting and how easy it is for other people to steal your thunder. It's an English phrase that says what you're going to say. Let me give you a little quiz so that you can multitask while I'm talking. Some of you who were at the event on Monday will have done a little quiz with me, which was to explore how your systems thinking acted out or not. So my little quiz for you is, if I take a pen, and this is a whiteboard or something here, and I take the pen for a walk, and I take the pen back to the point that I started, what have I done? So I'll leave that question with you. We'll come back at the end. Okay. I arrived here with some concerns as to the future relationship between the regenerative world, which I didn't really know a lot about, and a new relationship with AIESS. And that relationship with the systems or cybernetic world, which I've been part of for a very long time. I can assure you that I am reassured. I know that they can be extremely mutually reinforcing, and in fact, both groups can't really do without each other. So that to me is important. I'm reassured at another level, another personal level, when I discovered that Professor Amar and Professor Sashmi were partners. I was reassured that the world was in good hands because my partner is Professor of Social Work as well. And I can reveal that even though I was working in the systems world when my partner finished her PhD, and I read drafts of it, and through the process of reading drafts of her PhD, I got introduced to systemic family therapy. And it was through that a lot of my insights into and my expansion of the systems and cybernetic world came about. So, riffing off that notion about critical relationships, I was going to say, but I had to adjust it since Pavel has mentioned it, but he's drawn attention to my inattentiveness, because I felt that one concept that hadn't been discussed enough was the concept of love. Now, my work, as I've said in some conversations, has been heavily influenced by the work of Umberto Maturana, or the late Umberto Maturana, Chilean neurobiologist, scientist, epistemologist, renowned or known widely for what some people call the biology of love. And when I talk about love, and when Umberto talked about love, He's not talking about the Netscape or the Hollywood version of love. What he's talking about is something very fundamental to this community, and that is that we should each take responsibility in our relationships with the other. That when we acknowledge the other, then we are living love. And that's not only with each other, but with other species and the biophysical world. So I think that's a reframing that I offer to you to take away from the conference. He's done a lot of work on the braiding of language and emotioning as well, and I think if there were time and it was at the start of the conference, we could have an interesting debate about intentionality in relation to the braiding of emotioning and languaging. Now, in summing up what I've learnt this week, I want to move away from a focus on nouns and move to or ensure that we focus on verbs and practitioners practicing. That's my concern, and I want us as practitioners to be central to all we do. In fact, there's no other way. We are situated, embodied practitioners, and what we do will determine what happens. And we must remember that as a species or as an organism, we live in an ever unfolding present. There is no such thing as living in the past or living in the future. It is merely our interpretations of the past and our anticipations of the future that we live in this unfolding present. Now, I was very impressed by the numbers of papers produced in all sorts of ways, and the ones that demonstrated very effective working with local communities to effect changes in either social or biophysical conditions. And what I'd like to extol all of us to do is to work towards a more meta-level way of connecting all of those and escaping the fact that they're all projects. Haresh today said that in his work and field that projects were problems, and I've argued that in several of my talks. So can we form meta-level institutional connections, namely probably governance arrangements, which build greater solidarity and longevity such that his demand that these be still operational in 2035 is met. I didn't learn enough about the panchayat system here in India to know whether that had a role to play in the governance connections or not, and whether other boundaries were needed when one talks about a catchment or a village or a community or multiple communities. So some of those issues would have to be addressed. So regenerative practices for me at this time of the week demands the inclusion of and the recovery of our systemic sensibilities, our ability to be relational with each other, the world, and everything around us. Relationality is central, but it's perhaps not enough if we want to, let me just slightly rephrase that. It's one thing to say everything is connected, and we understand that, and that comes with a particular sensibility. But if we want to intervene purposefully in the world, that in itself is not enough. So we may want to intervene purposefully to take responsibility for our own actions, or we may want to intervene to change the coevolutionary direction of humans with the Earth, remembering that the Earth will go on regardless of whether we're here or not. Now, with this sort of sensibility, then the demand for literacy follows, and the talk I gave earlier today talks about systems literacy and multiple literacies. One of the reasons I don't include reference to many indigenous understandings of systemic sensibilities and systemic practices is that I'm very cautious, or trying to be responsible, to not appropriate. The last thing we need to do as Western educated or traditional academics is appropriate indigenous understandings and make it our own. We have to extend invitations for co-research, co-design, co-development, where mutual learning goes on and where they are able to take responsibility for their understandings. We can then talk about it. Of course, what we want to do with a greater systems thinking and practice capability is to conceptualize, design, and enact learning systems or transformative systems capable of purposeful action, action that changes things for the better. Capability, however, is always situated and embodied and needs to be understood as something that you perform, performativity. So AIESS is to be congratulated and encouraged. Speaking from the IFSR perspective, we are delighted they are a member, and we welcome others in India who feel that they might benefit from joining or applying to join IFSR because of their commitment to engaging in systems or cybernetics research and development. Over time, we in IFSR and with other members, we might begin to explore together some concepts that are still a little bit misinterpreted amongst each other, and to explore the value of the different interpretations, to see what the commonalities are. And one that I think of is actually the concept ecosystem. For those who don't know it, the concept ecosystem was first put forward by a group of ecologists at the University of Reading in England, when Tansley, the professor, said, actually borrowing the concept from one of his junior staff, we won't say anything about that, we need a concept which allows us as ecologists to do our work. And he proposed the concept ecosystem. And we know we've been talking about ecosystem all week, so the concept is alive and well. But particularly under the influence of ecological science, ecosystems move from being a conceptual device to do our work into reified things in the world which we can map, objectively describe, and do other things with. And so there are gains and losses from that process of objectification or reification, which we need to be aware of. And I think as we move between, whether it's the biophysical world, the social world, the political world, and use the concept ecosystem as it is now being used, and very well and wisely, we need to be, I think, we need to enhance our level of sophistication in its use. So IFSR's enthusiasm is to grow as a peak body of the systems and cybernetics community worldwide. We already have somewhere around 40 members, and we hope that IFSR will be able to enhance in the practices of our members, the prestige of our members, to be able to build solidarity amongst each other, to enhance their agency, to enable emergent progress at a global scale which grows from their expertise, and getting systems and cybernetics expertise into public policy programs, into research programs, into governance and government circles. we're trying to head in that direction, but we can only do so much as the particular type of organisation that we are. Systems research is clearly a key part of that and one of the key practices that should go in it, but we are a broad church interested in systems practice, systems consultancy, and these sorts of things. And any organisation who comes together to promote the use of systems ideas. And we imagine that AIESS will join us as part of an active group of members. So, just to conclude, IFSR extends its congratulations and thanks, as do I, to AIES and to Professor Nye for his great feat of pulling this excellent event together with his colleagues from here. And I also extend my thanks for wearing my Open University hat, where we've been educating systems practitioners, systems thinkers for over 50 years. We're open to approaches from you about that experience and to cooperation should you wish. I wish you all safe returns, and I hope to...
Thank you, Dr. Ray, for your comprehensive and inspiring remarks. I now invite Dr. Father K.S. Casimir S.J., Vice Chancellor, XIM University, to deliver his valedictory address.
Well, dear friends, on the stage, off the stage, I have no valedictory address to deliver here. I just share a story from Mel Gibson's film Apocalypto. Most of you might have seen that film. It's an epic adventure set in Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, Central America, depicting the last days of Mayan civilization before the Spanish arrival in the 16th century. One evening, the tribe gathers around an elder who tells a prophetic story that cryptically foreshadows the events to come. The story goes like that. A man sat alone, drenched deep in sadness. And all the animals drew near to him and said, "We do not like to see you so sad. Ask us for whatever you wish, and you shall have it." The man said, "I want to have good, powerful sight." The vulture replied, "You shall have mine. You shall have mine." The man said, "I want to be strong." The jaguar replied, "You shall be strong like me." Then the man said, "I long to know the secrets of the universe." The serpent replied, "I will show them to you." And so it went with all the animals. When the man had all the gifts that they could give, he left. Then the owl said to the other animals, "Now the man knows so much and is able to do so many things. Suddenly, I am afraid." But the deer said, "The man has all that he needs. The man has all that he needs. Now his sadness will stop, will cease." But the owl replied, "I saw a hole in the man. I saw a hole in the man, deep like hunger. He will never fill. It is what makes him sad and what makes him want more and more. He'll go on taking and taking until one day the world will say, I am no more. I am no more. And I have nothing left to give. And I have nothing left to give. This is a consequence of an extractive, predatory, and degenerative mindset. The only way to counter and combat this mindset is to have love. That is the ultimate solution. Every scripture, every religion offers this as solution. But because we do not see the long-term payoff, we are driven, consumed by the immediate payoff, we resort to this. As I have been listening to the reflections here, I feel so enriched, inspired, and so I want to thank each and every one of you here for coming all the way here and enriching each other. This cannot be and should not be confined to a small gathering like this. It needs to be embedded in the curriculum of school, of every college, of every university. That's the way forward. That's the way we can save ourselves from ourselves. So my request here is that as the leaders here of various organizations driving this new paradigm of systems thinking, regenerative ecology, consider making this university as a center of this. We are ready to invest whatever is required. Unlike Mumbai, Delhi, Bangalore, which are already trapped in the degenerative system, we are still capable of embracing and driving this regenerative ecosystem. And let's start this as a mission, as a movement, as a crusade, starting with class, primary, play school as well, play school onwards. As Prescott College, Dean said, literature plays a crucial role, central role. Now, these are concepts which cannot be conveyed except through storytelling. And India has a rich tapestry of, rich heritage of storytelling. So we need people, people from literature, people from folklore, filmmakers, and people from advertisement, coming together and coming up with stories which will crusade against this degenerative, extractive, predatory paradigm, so that India, as Aldous Huxley long back said, light comes from the east, light comes from the east. We hope with your help, with your support, with your inspiration, we'll be able to be that kind of light unto the world, a beacon to the world, so that we are able to save this planet. We are able to save this planet for posterity, for our children, for our children's children. I think that is the only mission any educational institution can have and should have. So thank you very much for coming all the way and helping us host this conference. Let's carry forward this mission year after year. Maybe in the meantime, once a year we meet. In the meantime, can we bring together school children and others and do some kind of workshop, storytelling sessions, or painting, or dance form, whatever it is, so that they are able to experience it and educate the adults. Thank you very much, and God bless.
Thank you, Dr. Father Casimir, for your profound and encouraging message, and we are very glad that you have asked us to carry on this initiative. I now invite Dr. Amar KJR Nayak, convener of ICRE 2025, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Full of gratitude. Thank you all for making this collaborative effort highly progressing to our objectives that we have. Before I say further, Aisen had asked a question, and he would like to know the answer or help us know the answer. Aisen.
Who wants to give an answer? What did I do?
So the pens mechanics work.
I drew a zero. Okay. Mathematician. Boundaries, yes. We're getting closer. Completed a circle, you see. Formed a thing called a circle. Well, I don't want to hold you up, but what I did was take a pencil for a walk and arrive back at the same place, and in taking it for a walk, I created a boundary between an inside and an outside. But a boundary is actually not a thing. A boundary is a relationship between an inside and an outside. Creates that relational dynamic between what is in and what is out. And so systems theory, really important, is what's the system-environment relationship? Because a boundary judgment creates a conceptual system, and what's outside it is in the environment of the system. And so I want to make the point that we shouldn't, in the practice of thinking about systems, be stuck with nouns, but the process by which we make those boundaries and create the relationship between what's in and what's out in our thinking about the world.
Wonderful summary for all of us to build on these notions, the ideas, the philosophy, the axiology, the design of system science. Thank you so much for all that. And I want to thank the VC, Father Dr. Kashmir, for giving this opportunity and giving us this encouragement that we should get on to improving the education, that is, save ourselves, to save others, to save ourselves. And that's, I think, a very nice way of presenting the idea of interconnectedness between the outside and inside that we begin to perceive. We have had this, one of the things, there are many interesting things. The focus of this conference for me was how to connect these systems thinking to regenerative thinking, to regenerative doing, practice, regenerative living, and regenerative sharing. So this was the purpose from my perspective and my collaborators and our AISS group. We have discussed many things, and it couldn't be better than getting the thoughts of the various collaborators, and those are also the ones who led several of the plenary sessions. More than that, most of you and most of them here are people who have transited many, many layers. And they carry the experience of what is the benefit of moving from different disciplines to many disciplines. And in the process, you actually understand the beauty and also the nothingness of anything as individual entity in a system. So we have many interesting things. We look forward from here on. The first thing that I notice is that there is an increasing acceptance of the vocabulary. There is an increasing uses of the vocabulary within the last 5 days. The vocabulary, at least some of them, which came out very strongly, even to the extent of the cultural teams using those terms and integrating into their place. Words like the systems, ecosystems, regenerativeness, the element of axiology in terms of from self to other-centeredness, intentionality in a way, it has come out very well. So we have begun with the vocabulary. Getting to the vocabulary, we have to go deeper and deeper and deeper to understand and practice it in life. There have been much progress in the last 5 days, and that shows the willingness to commit to this concern and commitment to regenerativeness. On the education front, Father Dr. Kashmir already mentioned, gave us a platform that let's begin with some place, and he's offered to make ICRE University a starting place to start thinking of how to bring in systems thinking, regenerativeness science into our education system, and not only limit to ourselves, but also take it to the school and higher up. That's one, and there are many. In fact, Professor Ray has been leading this. Dr. Pavel has been doing this. Gary has been doing it at managerial level, at large organization level. We have much of these practices here, and Tina has been trying to work out with the CJBE, the Colleagues of Jesuit Business Education. It's a large body across the world. And there are many more here who could actually take that forward. And that's the first thing that we should attempt at as a collaborative effort. We also found collaborative possibilities in health, studying microbes, studying health systems, studying behavior of people towards medicine, or doctors towards medicine or treatment methods versus care, and the wholeness of human systems. And it is very, very encouraging that we have had very successful doctors coming into this conference and sharing their thoughts and sharing their ideas. Microbiologists also participated very enthusiastically in this conference. So we hope we would get some collaborations in health, from health domain as well. Agriculture too, we have the university vice chancellors coming and saying we can do something together. And we have, of course, several universities in the country, which we will now try. And of course, there are outside this, outside India, there are many more that we can explore. On the governance front, we already have, I think we have a wonderful state, Kerala, well known for local governance, and we have just discussed the possibility of how we can implement the whole holistic model at Gram Panchayat level. So we'll explore that possibility very strongly now. The proposal is lying with the Panchayati Ministry of Panchayati Raj in Government of India, but I think we should take it forward to action in one of the states. Yeah, so thank you so much for this coming forward with this partnership. Same thing, yeah?
We could also involve women on a large scale, women in child welfare, because they are regenerative by nature. So we have Center for Gender Equality, Inclusive Leadership at ICRE. We can involve them in this. They're working among tribals in Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, similarly in the AP, so they could be another source. And this morning we have a conference, HR conference. One of our students has launched a startup called Pure Pace, where he's delivering the most modern medicine, cutting-edge medicine in tribal areas. In tribal areas, it's a startup started just here. Already is working in 3 states, and he plans to expand it across the world and the globe. Many have failed, whereas here he has used technology, high tech with high touch, married high tech with high touch, so it is really going places. So that is another note. They should be brought in. And he's very enthusiastic about it. Yeah.
Thank you so much. We will have to now look out for institutions. Already our partners have spoken to other potential institutions who could become collaborators, because the understanding there is none of us can do it alone. So we have to only rely on the 17th SDG collaborations. So that's the last and important one there. Same way, on policy, on institutions, we have been talking. Now I think there's a lot of coherence in some level of understanding, and we're going to take that forward. This is not just open to Indian institutions in India, but we will, of course, with our friends outside, to look out for other friends. There are many more. It's just that they have to find some coherence somewhere so they can connect to that network. There are many more who are feeling constrained in their own setups, but they don't have an alternative to go to. So this could be a result-oriented network which uses science to get to regenerative results. Likewise, social relationships on that front. Of course, we have School of Social Work, and I think we will now, of course, Professor Ray also mentioned there is this connection of the family to social work, and area which really appreciates the value of social relationships. Ecology, we have, of course, Professor from ATI. I hope he also gets us to some of the networks. We have, of course, Ajit Patnaik. We will work with them. Forest departments, we will work with them to see if. And so the target, therefore, for the group is, this is at one level. Of course, there are so many partners here who could also explore how to take this forward. So we would look for partners, and our next target would be, by the next time we have a conference, we should have had some progress in our field work, in action that we have undertaken. And one at least that which are very clearly, easily accessible, is of course one on the education, systems thinking in the education as a foundation course, or a very discipline-based course like the public policy. How do you apply system science into that? Or the practical work on the ground with regard to governance, are some of the health. This is very quick. They already have projects. They want us to get associated. And anyone who asks for help, I always say it is the consortium, that the whole consortium is available as a resource for you, and not one or two of us. So that's a principle that we follow, so that we actually grow together and we can make the difference in a better way. Mexico is already, the University of Mexico is already there, wants to collaborate. So those who have, PEVL has already got one or two who are considering to collaborate. So I guess one of the goals we have before the next conference is somewhat near achievable. So let's get to action and not come and talk about the same things we discussed this time. So we look forward for that. But more importantly, this part of my talk was more of vote of thanks. And I would simply say I'm full of gratitude for all of you, without which we wouldn't have progressed in our thinking. It is in this questioning, it is in this critiquing, it is in this appreciation that we progress. And I differ from paradigm shifts. We don't need a paradigm shift. This is a typical understanding of separatedness world, that there is a competition between one to the other. Regenerativeness is not about paradigm shift, but it is realignment of thoughts, realignment of ideas, realignments of axiology towards a flourishing state for everyone. There is no killing of anyone, like Thomas Kuhn would say, there's bloodshed in paradigm shift. We don't want to have a bloodshed kind of paradigm shift. We can transit to it in a very gentle, nice way, and that's how nature works. It is an misinterpretation, probably, that the survival of the fittest idea, that some kill the other to survive. They actually live with high degree of cooperation. That's the evolutionary ecology's finding so far, that they grow through not through competition, but through high levels of cooperation. So our regenerativeness idea is not about shifting paradigms leading to bloodshed, but it may happen over a time, but it's a very gradual, gentle, softer, and with full of mutual respect to each other. So that's the spirit with which we are going to take this forward. And in this part of the work, I wouldn't be doing enough if I don't recognize my doctoral scholars. 15 to 18 of them worked tirelessly to make this happen. They came on their own voluntarily. Most of them have slept only from 3 to 6 or so for the last few days, sifting the participants late night or getting them late night. So they have been working day in and day out. So thank you so much for everything. As I already mentioned, our AISS consortium members have been more than kind. It's unbelievably kind to have extended all their support. Say 5 o'clock we meet, which is morning 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, they're all ready. Never would they say no, not possible. They've always been pretty ready, and that's the, I think, understanding and support that we have received, and financially also they have supported whenever it was there available. So a big round of applause, and I would, as a sign of our gratitude and appreciation for each other. There's no one giving it to you. We are all part of the same team, so it is just sharing our gratitude with each other, that we'd like to give a piece of memento to each of our partners here. And I would request Father VC to kindly give it to each of our speakers of the stage, and then I'll call out some of the institutional collaborators and who can please come and receive. So, you would like me to start with Tina? So, yes, first we'll hand it over to Tina. Is Rajiv there? Yeah. So, then we take Professor Ray, the President of International Federation of Systems Research. Gary Smith. Professor Pavel Sankel. Professor Shishir Jha. Professor Sashmi Naik. Professor Jayant Rautrai. And my colleagues from XIM, Professor Bhaskar Basu. Professor Ranjan Mahanti. Else? Oh, yes, Professor Samuel has gone behind. Please, Professor Samuel. Thank you so much, Father, for offering this, our mementos to our speakers today afternoon, as well as our institutional collaborators. Now, I'd like to also show our appreciation on behalf of my, of course, consortium members, we want to appreciate our doctoral scholar volunteers who have put up this so well. Everyone had good words for all of you. Thank you so much. So let me read out the names, and maybe our institutional collaborators one by one can give it to our students. So maybe 2, 3 of you, please come forward. Sashmi, you also please come forward. Yeah, Sishi, please. Yeah, please come forward. And I'll read out the names, and you can, yeah, you want to, no, I'll read it out. No, let me take the pleasure to read out the names. Yeah, Arokya Ramesh. You go to the center. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Pratima Kumari Naik. Bhakta Prasad Nayak. Jagari Mani. Sudipta Kanungo. Saurav Baral. Pritish Padhi. Abhishekta. P. Abhishekta. Deepika Swine. Samprikta Sahu. Shreya Purkayat. Sean Joseph. Neha Sen. Sabir Kumar Barik. Periya Nayagam. And Nerissa Gomes. Come forward. You want to say anything? We are closing in 2 minutes.
Thank you, Dr. Nayak. You all are now invited to join for the high tea served outside the venue. Thank you all and have a wonderful evening. I request...
All the collaborators, please come forward.
First, yeah.